Ghostly tales, yet mirrors of human life. Hey everyone! Welcome to Encountering Chinese. Ghostly Tales from Zhai. Today, I'm going to tell you a story called Geng Niang. In Hunan province, there was a scion of a wealthy family named Zhai. Due to family reasons, Zhai married the daughter of the local official, Prefect Yu. The wife's nickname was Geng Niang. She was beautiful and virtuous, and their relationship was deep and harmonious. In one year, due to the chaos caused by marauding bandits in the Hunan region, Zhai had to leave his hometown and escape to avoid the banditry. Zhai decided to escape to the south with his family. Along the way, the Zhai family encountered a young man who claimed to be fleeing with his wife to avoid disaster. This young man introduced himself as Wang Spa and claimed to be from Yangzhou in the south. He warmly offered to guide Zhai and his family. Delighted by the offer, Zhai and Wang Spa's families decided to travel together. When they reached the riverbank, Geng Niang quietly warned Zhai, "Please do not share a boat with Wang Spa. I noticed that he has been peeping at me several times. His eyes were wandering, and his expression was uneasy. He must be someone with ulterior motives." Zhai promised Geng Niang's request not to share a boat with Wang Spa. However, when they arrived at the riverbank, Wang Spa appeared very helpful and had even arranged for a large boat. Without waiting for Zhai to speak, Wang Spa helped load all the luggage onto the boat. Seeing Wang Spa's diligent assistance, Zhai couldn't bear to refuse. Upon second thought, he considered that Wang Spa also had a young wife with him and thought there shouldn't be any major issues. After both families boarded the boat, Wang Spa's wife shared a cabin with Geng Niang, treating her with great kindness and friendliness, which comforted Geng Niang. Once settled, Wang Spa sat at the bow of the boat, chatting amiably with the boatman, appearing as if they were longtime friends or relatives. After some time, the sun set, and with the long waterway ahead, Zhai sat on the boat, looking around but unable to distinguish the directions in the vast surroundings. He felt the mysterious and treacherous environment, causing some unease in his heart. After a while, a bright moon gradually rose, allowing Zhai to see that the boat was surrounded by reeds. The boat then stopped, and Wang Spa invited Zhai and his father to the deck to enjoy the scenery and relax. Taking advantage of Zhai's inattention, Wang Spa pushed him into the water. Seeing this, Zhai's father tried to call for help but was also knocked into the water by a boatman with an oar, drowning on the spot. Zhai's mother, upon hearing the commotion, walked out to investigate. Witnessing her family's tragic fate, she also fell into the water and drowned. Wang Spa then pretended to shout for help. In fact, when Zhai's mother came out of the cabin to investigate, Geng Niang followed behind her, observing everything that happened clearly in secret. When she saw her family drown, she did not panic. Instead, she cried and said, "My in-laws are all dead. How can I live in the future? Wang Spa entered the cabin to persuade Geng Niang, telling her not to worry and suggesting that she go to Jinling with him. He claimed to have a house and land in Jinling and promised a comfortable life. Geng Niang, ceasing her tears, said, "If that's true, I would be content." Upon hearing this, Wang Spa was overjoyed and immediately attended to Geng Niang's needs, doing his best to fulfill her requirements for clothing, food, and daily necessities. At night, Wang Spa pulled Geng Niang, wanting to sleep with her. Geng Niang declined, citing that she was in her menstrual period and it was inconvenient. Reluctantly, Wang Spa went to sleep with his own wife. In the middle of the night, Wang Spa and his wife began to quarrel, but the reason was unknown. All that could be heard was Wang's wife shouting loudly, "You actually did such a thing. Aren't you afraid of divine punishment smashing your head?" Hearing this, Wang Spa raised his hand and fiercely slapped his wife. Wang's wife continued yelling, "Let me die. I don't want to be the wife of a murderer." Wang Spa roared angrily, dragged his wife out of the cabin door, and then heard a splash. Several boatmen on the deck shouted noisily, saying Wang Spa's wife fell into the water. Not long after, the boat arrived in Jinling, and Wang Spa led Geng Niang back home. They paid respects to Wang Spa's mother. When Wang's mother saw Geng Niang, she was surprised and asked why she wasn't the original daughter-in-law. Wang Spa pretended to be sad and said, "The former wife accidentally fell into the river and drowned a few days ago. This is my newlywed wife." Back in the room, Wang Spa wanted to share a bed with Geng Niang. Geng Niang smiled and said, "As a man in his 30s, haven't you slept with a woman before? Even common people in the market celebrate their wedding night with a cup of wine. With your affluent family, can't you even arrange a simple celebration? There's no charm in two people being sober and facing each other like this." Wang Spa was very happy and quickly arranged food and wine for Geng Niang to toast. Geng Niang held a wine cup, earnestly and warmly urging him to drink. As Wang Spa gradually got drunk, he declined, saying he couldn't drink anymore. However, Geng Niang picked up a large bowl of wine, cajoled him, and insisted that he drink it all. Unable to refuse, Wang Spa had to drink it again. Soon, Wang Spa became too drunk to stand up. He stumbled and took off all his clothes, urging Geng Niang to get on the bed quickly. Geng Niang removed the cups and plates, extinguished the candles, pretended to go to the toilet first, went out to find a knife and returned to the room. Geng Niang fumbled her way to Wang Spa's neck in the dark. However, Wang Spa, unaware of what was happening, held on to Geng Niang's arm and spoke affectionate words. Geng Niang accurately located Wang Spa's neck and struck down with the knife. However, her strength was insufficient, and Wang Spa, surprisingly, did not die. He shouted loudly, sitting up. Geng Niang swung the knife again, and this time, Wang Spa finally breathed his last breath. Wang's mother seemed to hear unusual noises and came over to inquire about what had happened. Geng Niang killed her as well. At this point, Wang Spa's younger brother, Wang Shijiu, realized that something was wrong. Geng Niang knew she couldn't overpower Wang Shijiu, and ultimately faced inevitable death. She quickly took out the knife and committed suicide. However, the blade was too dull and had a gap, so no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't pierce it. Geng Niang could only open the door and run outside. Wang Shijiu followed closely behind, so Geng Niang had no choice but to jump into the pool in the courtyard. Wang Shijiu called for servants, and when everyone pulled Geng Niang out of the pool, they found that she was already dead. However, her face still looked beautiful, just like when she was alive. When the servants checked Wang Shiba's body, they found a letter on the windowsill. Opening it, they discovered that Geng Niang had written it. In the letter, Geng Niang detailed the unjust killings of her family. This news quickly spread, and people believed that Geng Niang was an extraordinary and heroic woman. They discussed raising some money to bury her properly. Thousands of people came to see Geng Niang upon hearing the news, and when they saw her body, they couldn't help but kneel down to pay their respects. In just one day, people raised more than 100 taels of silver and buried Geng Niang in the southern suburbs with great solemnity. Some enthusiastic individuals even adorned her with a phoenix crown embellished with pearls and the robe that only outstanding wives certified by the government could wear. There were also numerous items buried with her. Unexpectedly, when Jin Da-yong drowned, he luckily grabbed a piece of driftwood and managed to stay afloat. As dawn approached, he floated to the surface of the water near the Zhai River and was rescued by a passing small boat. The boat owner was a kind-hearted wealthy man named Mr. Yin, who had specially arranged this small boat for rescuing drowning individuals in the Zhai River area. Upon awakening, Jin Da-yong heard the boatman recount the events and went to Mr. Yin's residence to express his gratitude. To his surprise, Mr. Yin treated Jin Da-yong exceptionally well and persuaded him to stay and teach his son. Since Jin Da-yong was uncertain about the whereabouts of his parents and Geng Niang, he hesitated for a moment. After a while, someone reported to Mr. Yin, saying, "Another elderly couple who drowned has been brought up by the small boat." Jin Da-yong suspected it might be his parents, rushed over, and indeed, it was them. Mr. Yin also arranged coffins for Jin Da-yong's parents. While Jin Da-yong was mourning, another report came. The boatman rescued a woman who fell into the water. She claims to be Mr. Jin's wife. Jin Da-yong was shocked, wiped away his tears, and went out. At this moment, the rescued woman had already arrived at Mr. Yin's residence. Jin Da-yong realized that she was not Geng Niang but the wife of Wang Shiba. She cried bitterly in front of Jin Da-yong, begging him not to abandon her. Jin Da-yong said, "My heart is in complete chaos now. I have no mind to care about others." The woman became even more sorrowful after hearing this. After Mr. Yin inquired about the details, he happily told Jin Da-yong that this was heaven's retribution and strongly advised him to marry the woman. Jin Da-yong used the recent death of his parents as an excuse, politely declined, and expressed that he was about to seek revenge, fearing that having family members would burden him. The woman said to him, "According to your reasoning, if Geng Niang were still alive, could you use revenge and mourning as excuses to drive her away?" Mr. Yin, considering the woman's words reasonable, expressed his willingness to temporarily act as a substitute for Jin Da-yong in taking care of her. After Jin Da-yong avenged his parents, they could proceed with the marriage. Jin Da-yong reluctantly agreed. During the funeral of Jin Da-yong's parents, the woman, dressed in mourning attire, wept uncontrollably, as if mourning her own in-laws. After the funeral, Jin Da-yong, carrying a sharp blade and a begging bowl, intended to go to Yangzhou to seek revenge. The woman stopped him, saying, "My maternal family's surname is Tang, and we have lived in Jinling for generations. Wang Spa, that treacherous person, is also from Jinling. Wang Spa claimed to be from Yangzhou before, but he was deceiving you. Moreover, many of the water bandits in this area are likely his associates. I'm afraid that before you can avenge your family, calamity may befall you first." Jin Da-yong, upon hearing this, was at a loss on how to proceed. Just then, there were widespread rumors locally about a woman who avenged her enemies, and people of all ages along the Huai River were discussing it. The woman in question turned out to be Geng Niang. Upon hearing this, Jin Da-yong was initially delighted but soon became even more sorrowful. He expressed to Ms. Tang that he couldn't marry her, saying, "Fortunately, Geng Niang did not suffer disgrace and dishonor her family. How can I, with such a resolute wife, bear to marry again and betray her unwavering loyalty?" However, Ms. Tang insisted that there was already an agreement for Jin Da-yong to marry her, and she vowed not to leave him, even if it meant becoming a concubine. At that time, there was a deputy general named Yuan who was a good friend of Mr. Yin. Before heading west, General Yuan visited Mr. Yin to bid farewell. Impressed by Jin Da-yong, General Yuan invited him to manage documents under his command. Soon after, rebellion broke out, and General Yuan was ordered to quell the uprising, achieving great success. Jin Da-yong, due to his involvement in significant military affairs, was rewarded according to his merits and was appointed to the position of guerrilla officer. After these military achievements, he returned once again to Mr. Yin's household, where he officially married Ms. Tang. A few days later, Jin Da-yong took Ms. Tang to Jinling, specifically to pay respects at the grave of Geng Niang. Passing through Zhenjiang, they planned to visit Mount Jin. While boating on the river, a small boat approached them. In the boat sat an old woman and a young lady, and Jin Da-yong noticed that the young lady resembled Geng Niang. The small boat swiftly passed by, and the young lady gazed at Jin Da-yong through the cabin window, looking even more like Geng Niang. Surprised and doubtful but hesitant to inquire directly, Jin Da-yong urgently exclaimed, "Look, a flock of ducks flying into the sky." The young lady, in response, also shouted loudly, "See the greedy dog about to eat the fishy food." These two phrases were jokes shared between Jin Da-yong and Geng Niang in their private chamber. Jin Da-yong, upon hearing this, was even more astonished. He quickly turned the boat, approached the small boat, and confirmed that the young lady was indeed Geng Niang. The maid helped Geng Niang onto the boat, and Jin Da-yong and Geng Niang, facing each other, embraced and wept. Passers-by were deeply moved by their reunion. Ms. Tang approached with the etiquette of a concubine meeting the main wife and greeted Geng Niang. Geng Niang, surprised, asked Jin Da-yong what had happened, and he detailed the story. After hearing it, Geng Niang held Ms. Tang's hand and said, "Back then, the words we exchanged in the same cabin have stayed with me until today. I never expected that today, you and I would go from enemies to family. Thank you for burying my in-laws. I should thank you first. Why would you still treat me with such great courtesy?" Later, the two women referred to each other as sisters based on their age. Ms. Tang, being 1 year younger than Geng Niang, called her elder sister. Geng Niang recalled that after being buried by the citizens of Jinling, she lost track of time. One day, she suddenly heard someone loudly shouting to her, "Geng Niang, your husband is not dead. You can still be reunited." It was as if she had just awoken from a deep sleep. Feeling around, she realized she was surrounded by walls, understanding that she had already passed away and been buried. However, she only felt the space was a bit cramped but had no other discomfort. A few days later, some unruly youths from the village arrived at Geng Niang's grave. Knowing there were many valuable items buried with her, they became greedy. The youths dug open the tomb, opened the coffin, and were about to take Geng Niang's burial items when they suddenly discovered that she was still alive. This instantly frightened them, leaving them bewildered. Concerned that they might harm her, Geng Niang pleaded with them, saying, "Thanks to your arrival today, I can see the light of day again. Take the golden hairpin and earrings on my head. I also request that you sell me to a temple to become a nun, so you can gain some money. Please rest assured, I will never reveal what happened today." Unexpectedly, the ruffian youths knelt down, bowing their heads and said, "Madam, your virtuous and chaste character is admired by both gods and mortals. We, a few ruffians of the streets, resorted to such unscrupulous actions due to our dire circumstances. As long as you don't disclose today's events, it will be the luckiest outcome for us. How could we dare to sell you to a temple to become a nun?" Geng Niang insisted. "Don't worry, it's my own willingness." One tomb raider suggested, "I heard there is a Mrs. Geng in Zhenjiang. She has been a widow for many years without any offspring. If she sees you, she will surely be delighted." Geng Niang expressed her gratitude to them. She took off all her pearl accessories and handed them to the tomb raiders, who hesitated but eventually accepted the gifts after Geng Niang insisted. The unruly youths then escorted Geng Niang to Mrs. Geng's residence, fabricating a story that Geng Niang got lost due to a strong wind on the river. Mrs. Geng, a wealthy widow without a companion, was delighted to see Geng Niang and treated her like her own daughter. On this very day, Geng Niang had just returned from touring Mount Jin with Mrs. Geng. Geng Niang then detailed the entire story to Mrs. Geng. Subsequently, Jin Da-yong boarded Mrs. Geng's boat and paid his respects to her using the proper etiquette. Mrs. Geng warmly entertained Jin Da-yong, treating him like her own son-in-law. Mrs. Geng even extended an invitation for him and Ms. Tang to visit her home. After staying at Mrs. Geng's house for a few days, they eventually departed. The exchanges between the Geng and Jin families continued without interruption. At the end of the story, the author provides the following commentary. Faced with significant upheavals, those who willingly endure humiliation may survive, but those of unwavering integrity may choose to face death. Those who choose to live may incur intense hatred, almost glaringly so, while those who embrace death evoke deep sorrow and tears. As for someone like Geng Niang, who can converse with ease in front of enemies and personally take the life of an enemy, even among the renowned heroes throughout history, few can match her courage. Who says that women cannot possess the same bravery and strategy as those celebrated heroes? Alright. That's all for today's ghostly tale. Geng Niang. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Please also encourage everyone to comment and share more. We'll see you in the next episode.